The 910 Comedy
Podcast Network.
Welcome to a special episode of Marital Tips, where we invite you into our marriage for the debates, discussions, and miscellaneous topics that make up our everyday life. I'm Tim.
I'm Karen.
And normally this is where we would put in a joke about us being geeks and some hot topic from last week, but this isn't a normal episode.
It's not. We have a really big announcement.
Yeah, we do.
I'm pregnant.
Yeah, you're pregnant. We're expecting a baby.
We are expecting
a baby. And we've been dying to tell people.
Yeah, so this is
especially me.
This is it. We're out.
Yeah.
We out.
This is the public announcement.
Yeah, it is. I'm 13 weeks when this comes out, 13 weeks in like one day.
Yeah.
And so in my second trimester, I think I saw today that I'm like right along the same timeline as Bindi Irwin's pregnancy. So
really?
Yeah.
Really?
So that's cool.
Okay.
I think. I don't know.
I thought she was further along.
No, she posted today, when we were recording this on Monday, she reposted a picture of her ultrasounds, and it was like pretty much what like a 12-week ultrasound looks like. Oh. And that's when I'm 12 and a half weeks when we're recording this. So I don't know. So cool, right?
Birthday twins.
I know.
Or birthing twins or whatever.
I'm due late in March, maybe early April.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
The official due date is late March, but, I don't really know anybody who has ever been their exact due date. So we'll see. I mean, we will see, but we're very excited. And
we're very excited.
We're really, really excited. And we're really excited to finally be able to tell you guys. I think we've recorded like 6 or 7 episodes when we've known that I'm pregnant, and we have...
And all I've wanted to do is just make references to the fact that you were pregnant.
I know.
And it's been killing me.
Yes. So Tim is now satisfied. We're out.
Yeah.
I'm pregnant. And one thing that we really wanted to do was share kind of our entire journey, our conception journey from kind of start up until now. Which has been a pretty long journey. So we'd love to share that with you guys. And I guess we'll just start from the beginning.
Trigger warning. We are sincere about wanting to invite you into the everyday parts of our lives and our marriage. So we want to share our journey to this point with you, but that may be a little bit of a rough topic for some people, especially when we get to discussion about pregnancy loss. It may be triggering to some of you. We will include some show notes that you know when you can skip to, but we want to be honest about what we went through, and we understand that that may not be something that all of you can handle. So we do encourage you to jump to the safe portion. We'll let you know when that is in our show notes, but this is a trigger warning for you guys.
I also want to say, as kind of like a little disclaimer before we really get started as well, anything that Tim and I discuss in this episode or any future episodes to come about my pregnancy is just our decisions and our personal journey and what has made sense for us and what we were told medically. So we definitely don't judge anybody who has a different outlook on the journey of pregnancy or the decisions you need to make for pregnancy and conception and parenthood and all of those things.
We're definitely not doctors. We're definitely not telling you how you should go about your pregnancy.
Yeah.
We're just sharing how we are going about it, because some of the things that we've been through, we feel need to be discussed a little bit more openly than they currently are.
Yeah.
So that's why we're kind of sharing our story in this way.
Yeah, and I don't want to have to say after everything that we discuss, like, oh, but we don't judge if you do something different or anything like that. I think we'd like it to be implied from here on out that there is absolutely no judgment for anybody who takes things in a different way than we would, or that we did or are going to do. And, that whole decision about having children or how to go about having children or how to go about your pregnancy and your parent, your new parenthood and things like that is a very personal decision. And I think that we all can respect that we all have a different path to that. So,
okay. So now that we've got the trigger warning and the disclaimer out of the way.
Yes.
Let's go back to kind of the beginning of our story here.
Mm-hmm. We've had a very long battle with the idea of conception and conceiving itself. It started actually before we even got married. And for those who are not aware, we've been married for almost 2.5 years at this point.
No.
But our journey for trying to conceive, or TTC, as they call it, started a little bit before we even got married. And that was because just due to some personal things or like things that happened in my past or feelings that I had been wondering for a little while about my ability to conceive a child and to carry a healthy child to term and to have a healthy pregnancy and things like that. So it was at the point that we were engaged, but we were not yet married, that I decided that I wanted to speak to an OBGYN person about it. And that was I happened to be needing like my annual visit and my pap smear and all of those things coming up anyway. So when I went for my annual, I decided I was going to speak to somebody about my concerns with fertility. And the person who saw me was a midwife. It was not a doctor who performed the pap smear and all of those things, which isn't all that uncommon, I don't think, in certain parts of the country. And I certainly don't have any, issues with midwives, and I don't think they're like unqualified or anything like that. But this particular midwife in like specifically, I ended up having kind of a problem with towards the end. But anyway, at the beginning, we had, the appointment. She performed my pap smear, cervical exam, all of those things. And at the end, she asked, do you have any questions? And I said, well, I'm getting married and I really would like to, I have some concerns about fertility. And I kind of explained to her why that was. And I was like, I just kind of want to know, or to have some kind of information to share with my fiance so that we can, talk about this. And kind of without another beat, she says, well, I feel pretty confident to say that you have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I don't know too much about PCOS, to be honest. It's something that you can, if you're interested or if you are concerned about that particular disease, you can look up or discuss with your practitioner or whatever. I'm not the wealth of knowledge of information on that. So, but I do know that it is very often cited as a reason why people have trouble conceiving. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I just kind of took that when she said it. I didn't really ask for much information additionally. I assumed, she had just given me an exam. I had seen her before previously as well. So I thought, maybe she knew something and maybe some differences in my vitals. I don't know. I don't know. And I also was kind of primed to hear that there was like some kind of confirmation, like, yes, you will have. Like
you brought it up because you figured there was a problem.
Yeah.
So to hear that there was something that the doctor was seeing.
It was a confirmation bias, I think, for me to accept it pretty willingly. And I said, okay, so well, what does that mean for me being able to have children? And she said, well, I would tell you that it's probably likely that it'll take you longer than most couples to conceive naturally without any type of medical intervention. I would estimate it would probably take you more than a year to conceive. So this was in what, 2016?
This would have been late 2017.
Something like that. So I left the office, I went home and I talked to you about it. And it was a conversation that I felt was important to have before we got married, because obviously we both had the expectation that we would have children together. And that was just part of our plans of marriage. It was something that
we both wanted.
Yeah. So I wanted to present that to you in case you know, the way that I was told and diagnosed essentially was that if I could have children at all, it would take a very long time and possibly include some type of medical intervention to be able to do so naturally.
Right. And I remember, you know, you coming home and telling me that. And I mean, it was a difficult decision. But I mean, if we're being honest, you know, I didn't really back away from it because I knew there were other options. You know, even if we couldn't have kids in the quote unquote traditional way, you know, I knew that there was adoption and IVF and other options. So, you know, it didn't really deter me from wanting to get married or anything. I just knew that it was an obstacle we'd have to overcome.
Yeah. So because of that, we actually started trying, and I say that very lightly, trying to get pregnant before we ever got married.
Yeah.
Because
probably within a couple of months of when you had that information.
Because I was told, you know, it could take you a very long time to get pregnant. And at that time, I'm not sure what was in our plans for when we wanted to have children, but I just thought, we just decided together, like, let's be really casual about it at first. You know, we essentially just stopped any method of birth control at that point. We weren't really doing anything beyond that in terms of like trying to have children. But I would say that's when really like our conception journey started, was when we really didn't have really any method of birth control.
Yeah. And there were other factors for us too. We're both, you know, a little bit older than the traditional starting to have children phase that most people accept. You know, they told us it could take more than a year, and they weren't really going to do any intervention stuff until we had been trying for a year.
Yeah, the office I saw and the person I saw made it pretty clear to me that until we had been trying for a year, they really weren't going to entertain any types of notions about additional help from them, basically.
So we really kind of wanted to get started on trying.
Right.
Anticipating that it was going to take that long. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it's been 2.5 or 3 years.
If you're counting, that was more than a year ago.
So anyway, so that year, you know, we got married. We enjoyed being newlyweds, and I had my annual visit again around that same time. And I went back and saw the same midwife, the same person. And at the end of the exam, when she did my cervical exam and pap smear and all of that stuff, she said, like always, you know, do you have any questions for me? And I said, well, you know, my husband and I have been pretty casually trying. And I say casually because I know that there are more intensive methods that you can take when trying to get pregnant that we were not doing. And so I said casually, we've been trying for a year. I'm not pregnant. So I'm concerned that maybe at this point, what's the next step? Basically, like, do we need to have fertility testing? Do I need to start taking medicine? Is there a need, do we need to discuss saving money for like a more, like an IVF type of thing? And she was like, well, I don't know. Sometimes people take a little while, especially if they're not, doing all this stuff to get pregnant. And I was like, well, I have PCOS. And she said, well, who told you that? And I'm like, you did.
Like literally you.
Literally this individual that I'm speaking to right now, you did in this office, and I'm pretty sure the same exam room if we need
like a year ago.
A visual jog here of our memory. And she was like, well, why would I have said that? And I don't know, lady.
You're the one who said it. Why would you have said it?
I don't know, lady. Like, she was like, well, looking at you, there are some things that make me think maybe you don't have PCOS. Like, I know one of the, this isn't present obviously in all cases, but I know one of the examples that people say is a symptom of PCOS is like, you tend to have quite a bit more hair than like people who don't have PCOS, like more facial hair, more arm hair, things like that. And she cited that as like a reason why. She was like, I don't think you have this. And I'm like...
Yeah, I haven't noticed you with a beard or anything.
I'm like, lady, like, I've been living with this diagnosis, my husband and I, for a year. What do you mean? And she's like, well, and at that point, I didn't know anything about, and I still kind of don't know much about how PCOS is diagnosed in an official capacity. Like, if there is any testing, what that testing looks like, or, you know, what symptoms you have to present in order to be diagnosed with that. I'm really not sure. But I can tell you that other than the traditional annual visit that you would expect at a gynecologist, no testing had been done to my knowledge on me.
You just told me I have it.
Yeah. Like, this lady was just like, yeah, you have PCOS. Like, pretty unapologetically too. Like, she was just like, and so we had lived with that for a year with this expectation and knowledge, really. I mean, like, who can you trust if not like a medical professional, basically,
right.
when they tell you have something.
And it's important to note this person wasn't a doctor.
She was not a doctor.
But she was representing the doctor's office and telling you this.
Yeah. And I'm not sure really, again, I don't have anything against midwifery or anything like that, but I'm not sure what the rules are about who is able to diagnose a patient. And she definitely diagnosed me.
Yeah.
And she didn't record anywhere in the chart that she had diagnosed me. There was no record of this doctor's office having been told that I have PCOS.
I'm starting to wonder if this person actually even worked there.
God. So at that point in the exam, she started to kind of have conversations she wanted to start a conversation about like, well, do you want to have your husband come in? We can do, you know, fertility counseling and things like that. And at that point, I was just too angry and too flustered with like being told that, you know, you have this thing and then no, you don't. It gave me a little bit of like emotional whiplash, I guess is like the best way to say it.
Yeah.
So I was just pretty done, like pretty over hearing anything that she had to say. And I didn't... At that point, when I was told, oh, well, maybe you don't have PCOS, and I went home and told you, I still felt like the aspect that I had gone in initially was still true. Like that I had initially gone into the doctor to speak about my fertility concerns, that it would take a long time. Yeah. I still felt in my heart that that was a true statement.
Well, yeah, because we had been trying kind of even casually for a year and still had no success.
Yeah. And there were times throughout the past however many, you know, years or whatever that we ebbed and flowed a bit in our intensity of trying. Like there were months that we took like a month off from trying, or we were going through like a transitional period in our marriage and in our life. And so we decided to take a break for a month or two or something like that.
And one of those was we were looking at buying a house.
Mm-hmm. And that was at the end of last year, 2019. Yeah.
So at this point, you were 2 years after the initial, yes, you have PCOS. Yeah. And a year after the, no, you don't. What are you talking about? Who told you that?
Yes, exactly. And really throughout all of the times in our marriage that either we hadn't been trying or had been trying, there are, and I do want to say that there are things that you can do at home that are sometimes recommended or suggested as ways to potentially increase your chances. I don't know if there's any validity to that. Again, I'm not a doctor, but there are certain things that this, like TTC, as I said before, trying to conceive, there's a very large community of that.
And no shortage of tools.
Yeah. There's a large community of people who are in the TTC process who all, you know, most of them are on forums or are reading things. And I was never part of that community because I wasn't interested for my own sake of joining any type of TTC community or in trying any of the methodology or tools that were sometimes suggested. And by that, I mean that sometimes there are recommendations not even necessarily from doctors, but from other women in that community who sometimes say, and some of these are from doctors as well, but to say like, you know, you should change your diet, you should change your lifestyle habits, you should change the way that you have sex with your partner. You should be tracking certain things about your vitals, like your temperature and your mucus and all of those things. And, or you should be having sex in certain positions. And
so why didn't you want to do all this?
For me, it wasn't, and for us really, I just don't think that it would have been the right decision, because I knew that I would have taken it to a point where it was an extreme. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have been something for me that was just a casual, like, you know, I kept a little diary recording like my little temperatures and, you know, my symptoms and how I was feeling that day and everything. It wouldn't have been that casual for me. For me, it would have been pretty militant, I think. Like, I would have been extremely strict with myself and strict with you. And
it would have put a lot of stress on us.
It would have, because that's just who I am as a person. And I knew that even though it might have meant that we were trying longer, to me, it was not worth putting that stress on our marriage and on myself. And there were some things that we did. I mean, I tracked my period very religiously. I looked at when it calculated my ovulation days to be. I did, you know, lay down for a while after we had sex and didn't move.
But you weren't doing stuff like the ovulation sticks and all of the other stuff. Like, there's so many tools out there for you to do.
Absolutely.
And you weren't really doing all of that.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I said I didn't want to say this after every statement, but if people are doing that, if they, you know, I don't think that it's crazy to do that by any means.
You have to do what's right for you, and you recognize that it would have driven you insane.
Yeah. It just, for my personality and the way that I take in stress, if there is stress around me, I become a sponge for stress. Like, if there is data and numbers and things to compare myself to, I take in that stress very easily.
Who are you talking to? I'm all about comparing numbers for no reason.
I know.
I'd have had Excel spreadsheets.
I know. Yeah. Like, we would have been able to look back on, well, what was my basal body temperature, you know, 2 days and 3 months ago at 5 p.m.? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that for us, it just wasn't right.
We probably, like, it's very possible we could have run ourselves into a divorce or, you know, on that route.
Yeah.
Because that's just the type of people we are. We're hyper analytical. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we take a lot of that on ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And as it was, I was already pretty stressed. About the, like, it really was like a private battle that, not that you and I were having against each other, but it was like you and me versus trying to have children.
Right.
And it was a struggle that, like I said, we really didn't share with many people, that we just, you know, every month when my period came, I would shed a little tear, or I would come out to you and you would hold me, and that was that. You know, it was just there was a sad time in our marriage every month for a couple years.
Failed pregnancy tests.
Yeah. And y'all, in our conception journey, I probably took about 100 pregnancy tests.
Yeah, which was a surprise to me.
When I told you that?
Yeah, over the course of what, like 2 years?
2 or 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, you took like 100 of them. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of them.
Yeah, because, and even in the months that we weren't trying, that we were like, let's take a break this month, I would still test, because I was, you know, we're still married, we're still sleeping together. Like, I thought maybe there was a chance that, you know, giving myself the break of, okay, we're trying this month mentally would mean that, you know, that something would happen for us. And I don't know. So it was just a very difficult time. And we had taken a little bit of a break towards the end of 2019.
When we were looking at buying the house, and, you know, we kind of wanted we we wanted to get to that stability point. It was a time of a lot of change.
Yeah. And Tim had said, well, once we're in this new house, let's start trying again. And let's start looking at other possibilities,
right.
Potentially looking into adoption seriously, or looking into getting fertility testing, from a lab, somewhere where I'm not speaking to some idiot who, and just kidding. I'm sure she's a great midwife in other instances, but this one lady, y'all, Anywho, so we buy our house. We move in the middle of December.
Yeah, just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm. And I get end of January 2020?
Yeah, it was mid to late January.
I got a positive pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And, it was it was very strong positive. The 2 lines showed up really quickly, and we were really excited, that I'd taken how many of these things, and finally it shows up with 2 lines, and that was the first.
And definitively.
Yeah. there was no arguing that second line. It wasn't a faint line. It wasn't like a, now you see it, now you don't, depending on who you ask kind of person. It was like,
boom, you pregnant.
Yeah. So, and it showed up immediately. So I was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And that makes sense too, because according to my last period, I would have been about 6 weeks when we found out. And I waited so long to test because I was a little frustrated with myself. I was like, don't do this to yourself. Don't take another test. It's just going to be negative. And to me, looking back now, it's funny that I thought that, because I was like, you're not pregnant,
Yeah.
But I was pregnant, and I had it confirmed at a doctor's office. They make you come in this part of North Carolina where we live. I don't know if this is true everywhere, but before anybody will schedule you for anything, they make you come in to a doctor's office to confirm your pregnancy with urine. It was never a blood test for me, but with urine, they made me come in to confirm, and it was confirmed that I was pregnant. So me being pregnant at the end of January / early February, we were excited, but I was also really anxious the entire time. I remember, right. And I know you remember too.
Oh, yeah.
Me just being anxious. I spent probably every moment, and probably annoyed you a lot, trying to talk about the baby and what are we going to do about this baby, and we need to prepare for the baby. And
yeah, you were stressing yourself out a lot over that one.
I was extremely anxious the entire time. I took tests every day or every other day to confirm, and in my mind that's what it was too. It was I need to confirm that I'm still pregnant. It wasn't I need to just get a collection of pregnancy tests together. It was I need to make sure it's still there.
Yeah.
And that was always the thought. And in the 3 weeks that we were pregnant, we had done a lot. We moved my office from one of the bedrooms to a different area of the house to prepare that to be the nursery. I had names picked out. I had the baby shower theme picked out. I had baby clothes that I had saved to my Pinterest and everything like that. But I was very anxious about actually moving forward with purchasing anything. And I remember I did at one point, because a family member invited me to go shopping, and I did, but I wasn't really that excited about it. And that's probably because the day that we went shopping, the 3 days prior, I had started to spot, and it was extremely light. And it was, it was brown. It was very, very faint. It never and this is going to be graphic. Sorry, guys. So again, if you don't want to hear this, you can skip forward. But it had never reached my underwear. It was so light. It was always on toilet paper and stuff that I saw the little brown telltale sign of spotting. And so that happened for about 3 days. I remember calling the nurse of the OBGYN clinic that I never ended up visiting, because they didn't want to see me until I was 10 weeks. So I never actually was a patient at that clinic. But I called the emergency nurse being like, I'm going to be a patient, but I haven't been seen yet because it's really early. And I'm spotting. And she said, don't worry about it. It's probably, it might be implantation spotting. It might have been, if you and your husband had sex recently, it might have been that. It might be, a lot of women just experience spotting. So that happened for 3 days. There was a day that I had a break, which is the day that I went shopping. And then the day after, it picked up again. And it still was the same. It was like spotting. I called this emergency nurse at the clinic I was meant to go to, probably about 3 or 4 times, always saying the same thing. And every time she was like, it's probably normal. If you're feeling additional symptoms like cramping, or if it starts to, she said, if you are bleeding enough that it soaks the pad within an hour, go to the emergency room. And it was never that much.
Right.
Up until, I think it was a Tuesday night.
In late February.
It was, I think, about 9 or 10 p.m. I'm not really sure. But I started to notice that the coloring of the discharge, the spotting, had changed into more of a brighter red, pinky color. And it was more spotting than it was previously, but it still wasn't enough to, quote unquote, fill the pad within an hour. So I was like worried, but I had been worried the entire time, of being pregnant. And I was like, well, it's really late. I'll just call somebody again in the morning. And you had gone to bed. I stayed up until I think about 1 a.m. And I woke up at 4:30 a few hours later. And I went to the bathroom and I knew something was wrong. And when I went to pee, my underwear and pajamas had been completely soaked in blood. I mean, it was soaked. So I don't remember, I don't remember if I was sad. I don't remember if I was I don't remember how I felt. I just remember being like, okay, well, we're going to the hospital. So I got in the shower. I'm like, I'm not going to the hospital in bloody underwear. So I got in the shower and I just had a little private moment to feel my feelings. And then I went and woke you up. You took me to the hospital. This was pre-COVID also. This was
just before COVID.
This was late February.
I think Corona had kind of just been documented in the U.S. Things hadn't been locked down and wouldn't be locked down for another 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was late February, and you were able to go to the hospital with me. We didn't have to wear masks or anything like that, so it was before all of those concerns. And I'm so glad you were with me. But yeah, things moved pretty quickly. I mean, I saw probably about 15 or 20 people between all of the techs and nurses and different doctors that they had come and speak to me, and it was all quite blurry.
I remember that day pretty clearly, though.
Do you?
It was...
I know. I think that day was harder for you than it was for me.
Probably. I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it. The phone calls that I had to make that day were probably the hardest calls I've ever had to make.
Yeah, because we had told our close family.
Yeah, our close family and friends all knew that you were pregnant. So, calling your mom and my mom and being like, hey, we're at the hospital and, Karen lost the baby. We've lost the baby. Mm-hmm. Was probably, and to do that, 4 or 5 times. I don't remember how many times I had to make that phone call to let everybody who was important know. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
And, you talk about how in a coronavirus world, you wouldn't have been able to make it. But in a corona world, neither of our families would have been able to be there. And I don't know how I would have survived that day.
Yeah.
Going through all that. It's not an easy thing to make. And, I'm one of those people who...
You're a fixer.
I'm a fixer.
You like to fix things. You're like, give me something to do.
I am most struggling when I'm helpless.
Yeah.
Or when I'm unable to be helpful. Mm-hmm. I'm not helpless. I'm unable to help.
Yeah.
And in a situation like that, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Except sit there and pretend that it's not bothering me so that it it's a little easier on you. And I mean, that was honestly probably the hardest day I've been through in my entire life.
Yeah. I mean, you have to watch your wife get like wheeled away
right.
to different departments and things that you can't go into, and you don't know what's happening. And I mean, it's fair. Like, as much as I don't think people talk about their own personal battles with miscarriage enough, I certainly don't think there's a lot out there from the partners of people who, like the fathers.
Well, guys don't talk about things like that. At least, traditionally and stereotypically, we don't. And it's not easy on us.
Right.
Obviously the physical aspect is not easy on the women. I'm not trying to take away from that at all, but the mental aspect is not, it's not easy to be a guy in that situation.
I mean,
we can't do anything.
No cakewalk for the ladies either, but
not trying to say it is. But I don't know that I've cried as much as I have that day. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very difficult situation for everybody involved.
Yeah. It was just a very helpless feeling, because it's not even like, and I've read on forums and things like that, sometimes people have bleeding and they go to the hospital and then they're sent back home and they're like, okay, stay on bed rest. And like, we'll see you back here in like a day or two. And like, there was none of that. I mean, that's hard also, but it was just like, it's gone and there's nothing to save and there's nothing to do. So you have to just wait for surgery, which I ended up having. The OBGYN emergency doctor who ended up coming down, I actually really liked her. There was one point where I'm in the room. Were you there when this happened? She was like talking to me, and she's like, because they had asked me a lot of, what are your symptoms? I was having very painful cramping, and I had some pain in like my upper back and shoulders and things like that. I
don't remember if I was there for that particular conversation.
She was like, so we're worried that it is a tubal or ectopic pregnancy due to just, that's just something that we look for with I mean, I didn't know I had that much blood in my body. Like, I'm surprised they didn't give me like a transfusion or something. Like, I was soaking through one of those hospital pads probably every 15 minutes. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Like that, I didn't know that I had that much blood in my body. And also, I guess, because I said I was having shoulder pain, and they thought that was perhaps indicative of a tubal pregnancy. Okay. But she goes, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up your fallopian tubes, and if it is an ectopic pregnancy, we're going to have to remove one of your tubes. Yeah. And at that point, I started crying. I don't think I cried a single tear all day, but at that point I started crying, and I said, I'm really sorry. And she goes, why are you sorry? And I'm like, I don't want to be that patient. And she goes, what patient? And I said, the dramatic one. And she's like, girl,
you're going through something dramatic. Yeah. You're allowed to be dramatic.
So anyway,
I think she even said, like, you were one of the least dramatic patients she's ever had.
Yeah, I think you were there.
Like
I think you were there. But anyway, and I'm just not a person who gets emotional really easily in front of even like family. I can in front of you really easily, as you know, but I don't know. I just don't get emotional really. So anyway, they wheel me off to surgery, and I ended up having 2 incisions because they did check my tubes first, and it was not an ectopic pregnancy. So they went into my uterus and they performed a DNC. Which I don't remember
what that means.
What that stands for. I'm not.
But I know it's basically they cleaned out all the remnants.
Yeah. Anything that was left over from the embryo, essentially, or any clots or anything like that, they removed.
I'm fairly certain the C is cleaning.
I don't know. But I don't want to say that.
I don't know what that means or any of that.
Yeah. So they sent me home with painkillers, and we were back home within 12 hours of when we left to go to the emergency room, which I thought was impressive.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I really have to say, our families were very supportive during all that. I don't know that I would have been able to make it without either of our families there.
Yeah, unfortunately, very quickly after I went home and was sent home for recovery and was recovering from my surgery and everything like that, that's really when COVID hit.
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks later, I think.
In the sense of like, they're saying they're really strongly recommending you do not get together with anyone who doesn't immediately live in your home.
In fact, thinking back about 3 weeks to the day is when, all the sports shut down. And that's kind of when everything kind of tipped off. I remember that specifically.
Yeah. It
was 3 weeks later. So, we hadn't really recovered mentally from all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's and there again, it ebbs and flows, right? Like it's grief. Like it's not predictable. It's not something that you can plan on feeling better in any type of progressive way. I remember Mother's Day, however many weeks or months later, 2.5 months later, is when I got my first period after the surgery. And that was, to me, getting my first period on Mother's Day when I was expecting to be a mom on Mother's Day was worse than going through the actual
I remember
loss
how hard
itself.
That was on you.
Yeah. And there was a lot going on around Mother's Day too, that I was like, okay, well, maybe this will be a distraction. But when you are at that level of grief and pain and sadness, there's really nothing that's going to make you better or make it distracted. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that Mother's Day was the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Like this most recent Mother's Day.
Yeah. That was a very hard day.
Yeah. And I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, but I can say with 100% honesty that Mother's Day 2020 was the worst day of my life in a lot of ways. But especially the grief and it being combined with the aspect of COVID and like not being able to have the support around me that I normally would have and have the distraction of like, going to see my mom. I didn't see my mom at all on Mother's Day. I spoke to her, of course, but it was just
a lot of it. I mean, we didn't really know how it was going to affect us, but we took the whole quarantine thing very seriously. But
we still are.
Unfortunately, that kind of meant that we were left to deal with it by ourselves.
Yeah.
It wasn't, that our families didn't care or anything, but we isolated. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being very difficult on us.
Yeah, I mean, all we could do was follow the recommendations of what was being said by our government here in North Carolina, as well as like overall recommendations from epidemiologists and people who, and also we were starting to get back at that point information from how other countries had approached, isolation and social distancing and what was working and what wasn't. And we were applying that to our own lives and still are today. We still have feelings about what we should and shouldn't be doing in regards to social distancing and things like that. And it's easier now in some ways, but also really hard because obviously like now we are pregnant and we would love to be able to do things like have celebrations and things like that. But I think especially going through the miscarriage and being isolated and sometimes feeling like we were really the only ones who were doing it. I think like a lot of people that we were seeing on Facebook and things like that, or different people we knew personally were just not approaching it in the same way that we were. And so it was a lot of. And
to be clear, the whole quarantine process is mentally taxing already.
Yeah, absolutely. On anyone.
And then to throw, what we went through, I'm not looking for like a pity party or anything, but it definitely made it harder on us. Mm-hmm. we really struggled through those months, and it wasn't any easier given, what you had heard about follow up. I don't know if you want to go into, the 3 months after.
Yeah, I was told, and also saw confirmations of this online, that it is easier, and I don't know what they mean by easier, but I think they mean more common to become pregnant within 3 months of having a DNC performed. So when that 3 months came and went, because I didn't even have a period for 2.5 months.
Right.
So I was like, oh, goody. My ovulation time should be right at that 3-month mark. And when that came and went, that first test of it coming back negative, I was like, okay, well, we're starting over, basically. Yeah. Something good could have come from this DNC, which is that it would have made it easier for us to get pregnant. That didn't happen. We're starting over from basically, step one of how long it took us to even get pregnant at all, let alone with a failed pregnancy. How long is it going to take for us to get pregnant with a successful pregnancy?
Right.
So I don't know that we were more intense I don't know if we were more intense or more relaxed about trying to get pregnant. I think we hadn't given up by any means, but we still hadn't really made any type of plans for medical intervention or fertility testing or anything like that. I hadn't increased any types of routines or included or added any routines that were not something that had already been parts of our plans.
Right.
So we just continued on living life as best we could.
Yeah.
And so now I think we're finally at the good news part.
We're getting there.
Do you have anything else to add?
Well, you went to the doctor in June.
Oh, yeah, I did. I went to the doctor in June for my annual. I had kind of let that slip a little bit, so I was a bit behind. And also, funny story, the reason why I went to the gynecologist initially was to have a breast exam done because I felt a lump in my breast that turned out to be a pimple.
Yeah.
It was under my breast where I couldn't really see it, and it was discolored. It was red, and I was like, oh crap. But it was it felt like a really full lump, a freaking a dime size, if not bigger.
Yeah, it turned out it was a zit.
It's a zit, yeah. So no worries there. But that's the reason I went. And they're like, okay, well, while you're here, do you want to just do your pap smear? And I was like, I guess. So
might as well, I guess.
So I had my pap smear done. It was a different person, a same office, but different person that I saw. And she goes to do my pap smear. And, I'm scooted all the way down with my ass half hanging off of the exam table thing, my legs in the stirrups. And she's getting ready to get in there. And she calls out to her nurse to go fetch her a different speculum. And I'm like, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, your cervix is really high and really soft, more than normal. So we're gonna, we just need a different tool. And I was like, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, it's just different points in your cycle. Sometimes your cervix is in different locations in your body and is, So I was like, okay, whatever. And so she does the exam. She grabs everything she needs to grab and she does her stuff. And she leaves and she's like, go, put your clothes back on. So I put my clothes back on. And when I stuck my head out to check where the exit was or whatever, she peeps her head back in and she's like, she gives me this really I'll never forget this look. She gives me this knowing look. And she's like, you're on prenatal vitamins, right? Because you're trying to get pregnant. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay. And then she leaves. She just walks away. And I looked it up. I was like, what was that for? And what's the whole high cervix thing? And apparently, when your cervix is really high and soft is your optimal fertile window for that month. So I was like,
it just happened to be that day.
So I was like, hey, baby. Hey, row. And looking back, like literally looking at the calendar and counting back of when we would have conceived. We conceived that day.
Yeah.
So I talk about a lot, like we kind of like low key had a little bit of like medical advice, like without her really giving us medical advice.
Like hey, try tonight.
Yeah, like I wonder if that wasn't like a little wink wink from her. And I would really love to see her again and be like, hey, I'm pregnant. Is that what you were trying to say? And just see if she remembers me at all. And if she did, then like, was she trying to be like, hey, get you some tonight, girl, get yours tonight.
Yeah, tonight's the night.
Tonight. So anywho, it was your birthday, which is July 3rd, for those who don't know.
So about 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, I was wondering about that comment that she made. And I'm like, no, it was a week later.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was too early.
Okay.
So, anywho, I was like wondering about that comment, and I'm like, so I wonder if I'm pregnant, but it was too early. Like I did take a test, but I knew it was too early to tell. And it said negative. So I was like, all right, whatever. And we partied on your birthday.
We celebrated my birthday. We did. We had been quarantining. We got together with friends who had been quarantining, and it was kind of a big night just because it was a chance to socialize.
Yeah. So we were really excited because we got together with like a select group of people that like we knew had been as serious as we had been about, social distancing and stuff, and that we all kind of needed a break from doing it. So we all got together, and I was so drunk. I was drunker than I think I've been in like, if not months, probably years on your birthday. And I remember feeling really weird about it the next day, like guilty that I had gotten drunk, because it wasn't long after your birthday that I started to feel like I am pregnant. Like it wasn't even a feeling, like it was a knowledge. Like someone had put knowledge in my brain, you are pregnant.
Yeah. It's starting to sound almost like you're completely in tune with your body.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you believe in that kind of thing, or if you, I don't know, like, but I'm just telling you that's what my experience was. Like I knew with all of my heart and soul and mind that I was pregnant. And I took another test and it was negative. And I was like, I wasn't upset or disappointed. I was just like, oh, it's too early. Like, that's all. It's just too early.
Yeah, it was another 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I had taken it with like my afternoon urine when I had just peed like an hour or two before also. So anyway, the next week I took a test really early in the morning. I think I woke up at like 7 on my own.
This was July 19th.
July 19th. And I'm like, today's the day. And I go into the bathroom.
Her life's a musical, y'all.
And I peed on the stick. And lo and behold, like it was so positive that the like you're pregnant line showed up before the control line.
Like it was almost more sure than the test back in January that was like, you're hella pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're really hella pregnant.
I wasn't even like happy when I got the positive. I was just like, okay, great, finally. Like I've known for...
Thanks for telling me what I already knew.
I've known this for 2 weeks, but whatever, cool. So I had thought that maybe I'll do something cute for Tim. I'll like go find like a onesie or something and tell him in like a cute way. I don't know. I had thought maybe, but I was like, no, screw it. So I went in and I woke you up, and
this was like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30, something like that.
And you're just like,
on a Sunday.
You're like, what is it? And I'm like, I'm pregnant. And you said, really? And I showed you the test with the 2 really, really strong pink lines, and we just held each other and like cried, and it was such a sweet moment in our marriage that I'll remember forever. And it was really cute. And I mean, our family, every single, member of our close family knew, I think within 3 hours of us knowing that, like we just called everybody and told them. And it was it just felt, and it felt then, and it has felt ever since, just so right.
It's a completely different feeling for you than the last time.
Yeah, like I have not felt anxious. I mean, I felt anxious in the sense of like, oh, I can't wait for like my appointments to get here because like that's an exciting thing. But I haven't felt anxious in the sense that I did before, where it was like a dreading anxiety. I felt very excited. We've really just taken this first trimester to just relax and enjoy, it just being the two of us.
Yeah, I mean, we're not rushing things like we were last time.
Yeah, we've discussed a couple of things, and I've made some purchases and, things like that. But I mean, overall, we've really just been enjoying and every Friday is like when my weeks turn over to the next progressive week. And like every, I think Thursday night or Friday after you come home from work, we always look at like the whatever week it is video. And
right.
Tim has like, my pregnancy tracker has like the fruits, but Tim has like a geek pregnancy tracker.
Yeah, mine's all references to like geeky crap.
Yeah. So
I don't even remember what it is this week, but
I think the week that it was, I don't know, the 11 or 12 week one, you were like, it's the size of a Lego minifig.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, he has in like the week that it was, a raspberry, he's like, it's the size of a peanut M&M.
And let's see, when this episode releases, you'll be what, 13 or 14?
13.
13. So it's the size of the arc reactor from Iron Man. Right in his chest.
That's big.
Well, goodness. I mean, I think it's more like...
they can't see that, what you're doing.
But you can.
It's also the size of a lemon for those who are not aware of the arc reactor size. But yeah, I mean...
But if you're listening to us, are you really unaware of what the arc reactor is? Yeah,
so I mean... In terms of like what we have done so far, we don't have much to tell you, but we are really, really excited, and we're so excited. Like, this isn't going to become like a pregnancy podcast by any means.
No, but I'm sure there will be updates.
Yeah, we'll update you guys, and I'm sure that, if you follow us on our socials and stuff, we're going to have pictures of like our little ultrasounds and things, and like, I'm not really like a bump date picture kind of gal, but I don't know. We're just so excited to share so far. Like, we felt so long like we're waiting for our time to come in terms of like being first time parents, and it's finally here.
And it's been almost 3 years now that we've been trying.
And it's just so right. Like, this is our baby. This is our child, and they're going to be awesome. And it's just so, so cool.
So do we want to try these questions?
Yeah, I gave Tim a list of questions because I even when I was not a mom, I liked to listen to other people's like, I'm having a baby chats. So these are like questions that I pulled that were like kind of common.
All right. So the first one, and we've addressed this one, so you can make this one short, but how did you find out?
I knew in my brain, like my body and brain knew before it could react with modern science with the HCG. I feel like Phoebe a little bit from Friends. She's like, my body has always moved faster than Western medicine when she like takes the pregnancy test so quickly after her IVF. But yeah, I mean, I knew, like, I was like, she knew I was pregnant. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't want to get into it about like what you believe and what you don't believe, but like I just
But knew. You've been very in tune with your body this whole process. You knew that something was wrong, and then there was the PCOS thing. Mm-hmm. Then you knew you were pregnant before, or you were unsure, but you knew something was wrong before. Mm-hmm. And then you knew this time, and this one feels kind of right.
Yeah.
Or does feel right, I guess.
I just knew.
So the next question is, how are you feeling?
I would love to normalize women being able to talk about how much pregnancy sucks and it not being a joke.
Which is kind of what we're doing with this show.
I mean, yeah, like it's a miracle and all that, whatever. But pregnancy sucks, you guys. Like, it sucks. And it's different for every woman. Every woman has her own, laundry list of symptoms, or maybe she doesn't feel any symptoms at all. I don't really want to compare my pregnancy to anyone else's, but for me personally and my own perception of like my health and my body, it's been awful.
Yeah, which leads into the next question of what symptoms have you had?
I have had nausea 24/7 for about 7 weeks now.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't thrown up very much, like actually the physical.
Yeah, the traditional idea of morning sickness hasn't really been something that you've had.
Yeah, I don't like hug the toilet all the time, but like I'm nauseous constantly. Like there is not a moment in my life. I don't remember what it feels like to not feel nauseous anymore.
Yeah.
And certain things definitely make it worse. I've had a lot of food aversions. Nothing with like meat with bones has been like a big thing that.
Yeah, chicken was a big one that like, you just suddenly could not have.
Tim brought home some Chick-fil-A probably like 5 weeks ago, or not Chick-fil-A, KFC. Because he got like drumsticks and stuff, and I almost had to leave the room. It was so awful.
Yeah, you about made me leave the room.
Yeah, I mean, and I just have like a higher sense of smell, like a greater sense of smell right now too. Like certain things like that smell strong normally, like laundry detergent to me, if I smelled them right now, I would feel like I was drowning in them. And things that really barely had a smell or didn't have a smell before have a really strong scent, like a smell. Yeah. Like I can smell the inside of, I can't go into it's really hard for me to go inside the refrigerator in our house because the fridge smell is awful to me. It's just so bad. And it's like a superpower, the amount I can smell. Also water. Like I'm a person that I really only drink water. Like I really don't and have never been interested in drinking anything other than water. Like I'm not a soda drinker. But water has been really hard for me to get down. And I don't know why. I spoke to my doctor about it and she was like, try different temperatures of water. Maybe try some water flavorings. I don't know. I think those are the main. What do you think? Headaches and heartburn are some recent additions to the club.
You haven't really had the cravings in the traditional sense. You kind of just bounce back and forth real quick between like, ooh, this sounds good. No, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. Like that quickly too.
Yeah.
But nothing like, ooh, I'm really craving or I really need to have this all the time. Mm-hmm. You're not having like the traditional.
Yeah, it's a moving target. There's no predictability to what I will be able to eat on a certain day.
Which is super fun for me.
It's pretty annoying. I mean, we're obviously really grateful and we're really excited. But, you know, like in a lot of like sitcoms, you know, like when a woman is pregnant, like a character is pregnant and she talks about like pregnancy stuff, it's like it's a joke, right? Like people laugh after it. Like
but it's not funny.
It's not funny. Like people just write it off as like, oh, you silly thing. Pregnancy is terrible, isn't it? I've been through it too, or, you know, whatever it is. But like, it's really like, I would love for people to be able to complain about their pregnancy without feeling the mom guilt of like needing to say like, oh, but it's all worth it. Or whatever. It sucks. Like it sucks.
Yeah. The next one is, have your pets been acting differently?
I think they have. Like, Knox is our cat and Oz is our dog. And our dog especially has been really pretty needy, I think. Like, more so than we just adopted him, after the
miscarriage.
Yeah, we got him, like, right before lockdown. So, like, mid-March. And he was pretty needy right when we first adopted him, and then he kind of wasn't. And then when I got pregnant again, he started to be really...
Yeah.
Like, when we take him over to see other dogs or something, he's, like, very showy and, like, tries to get more attention and stuff. And I don't know. So I think he's been more needy.
And Knox has been more outgoing and more in our bedroom and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Sense.
He's wanted to snuggle with us a little more, our cat.
And he'd been very averse to Oz for a while. And it's like right around the time that we realized you were pregnant, he started coming out of that shell. Mm-hmm. The next one is, do you know if it's a boy or girl?
I do not yet know if it's a boy or girl. I I have a very strong feeling, like when I knew that I was pregnant before the test confirmed it, I knew that it was a certain gender.
Yeah, we've kind of learned to go with your gut, and we kind of are leaning one way, but we're not ready to admit.
Yeah, we're not ready to announce what the gender is quite yet.
But you have a gut feeling.
I have a gut feeling. Every time I think of it or dream about our kid, it is that gender, and that's what we've been referring to it as. And we've already made some very specifically gendered purchases in terms of clothing and stuff. So
but nothing major.
It better be what I think it is, basically. But we will announce that when we know officially, which should be here in about 6 weeks.
All right. Next one is, are you nervous about being pregnant during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if we were serious before, I think I'm far more serious now about isolating and being really cautious about like washing hands and things like that. We've talked about, a quarantine plan if one of us should test positive. Mm-hmm. Or specifically me testing positive and you testing negative. We've talked about you going to stay with your parents for a couple of weeks if needed. Yeah. I mean, one interesting thing that's come about from me being pregnant and me being so confident that this is like a good, strong pregnancy has been like this mama bear thing that I've developed. Like normally I'm quite a people pleaser, I will say. Like I will put myself at, in extreme discomfort in order to just not shake it up at all.
Right.
But I feel very strongly that there is like nothing and no one that I care about more than the health of this child and the health of me, obviously being like the vessel for this child. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely really nervous, and it's also a little bit discouraging because I've seen quite a few people who are a little bit further along than me announce their pregnancy, and people make jokes about like, oh, here's another quarantine baby, or, oh, you got really bored, huh? Right? Like being alone together. And
we are not naming our child Corona.
No. But on a more serious note, I would really discourage anyone from making those types of jokes. If you do see someone announcing their pregnancy from a time which has been traditionally like a quarantined or isolating time in America, just because you don't know what that couple has gone through, and to imply that their pregnancy is a result of boredom or, something else, I think is really kind of a bad form kind of thing to say. Yeah. So I would really discourage anybody from making those kinds of jokes. Because no one has said that to me, because not many people obviously yet know that I'm pregnant. It's just been our close friends and family. But yeah, I just want to put that out there, that I think that is a really kind of a not great thing to say. So yeah, that's another aspect of being pregnant in this time of coronavirus that I think, sucks also.
Are you going to have a gender reveal party / baby shower?
We will not be having a gender reveal party because I just have never been interested in them.
Yeah. That's especially now with everything that's going on in California.
Oh God. I mean, we would never have anything with explosives, certainly. Our gender reveal is going to be, our doctor will look at the screen and be like, do you want to know? And we'll be like, yeah. And then she'll tell us.
And then it'll probably go exactly as the announcement of the baby has been. We will tell our close family and friends, and everybody else will find out on the podcast.
Pretty much. I mean, if you have one, that's up to you. Like, that's just your whatever. But I just don't like them. For me personally, I don't like attention, and I don't like people gathering in my honor for really any reason. So no, we will not be having a gender reveal in that sense, but we will share, I think, the gender before the baby arrives.
But what about a baby shower?
That one is harder to say because it's a little bit further down the line. I think I never really saw myself having that before as early as like 30 weeks of pregnancy, which is quite a while from now.
Right.
And obviously it will depend on the state of things at the time. We have pretty constantly remained at the same level of seriousness about, isolating and distancing and not having any types of gatherings that are more than like 5 people or anything like that. And we've been pretty consistent with that. So I think that if it looks like that is a bad idea, according to medical experts and our own government and things like that, we probably will not have one, in the sense of like everybody gathers together at the same time.
Yeah, we'll figure out another solution.
We might end up doing like quite a few smaller parties with like small groups of people and then waiting a bit and then having another one or something. We might do a virtual. I'm not really sure. We'll just have to kind of play it by ear and see how we're looking a few months from now.
All right, 2 more questions. What is the best and worst thing about being pregnant?
The best thing about being pregnant is being so excited to fulfill what I've known for a long time, which is like how great of a dad you're going to be. You are going to be such an amazing, amazing father. And you have shown me that throughout our entire relationship with how attentive and caring you've been towards me. But especially now, Tim has been incredible, like just really, really amazing. And I think it's just really indicative of how great of a father and husband and like figure of someone to look up to our child is going to have. And to be able to see that fulfilled for you finally, and to be able to want to be the one to fulfill that for you is just so cool. And it's something I'm fine with the pregnancy taking as long as it's going to take, but I really cannot wait to see you be a dad to this baby.
And the worst thing?
I mean, of course, all the symptoms is really difficult. Not feeling quite like myself. And there being nothing that anybody can do, including me, for a lot of it. There's some, things that I've discussed with my doctor and, things that maybe could make my life a little easier, but aren't really a good idea for me specifically. So like, it's left us where there's like pretty literally nothing that anyone can do to make me feel better or anything like that. And that is hard. It's also obviously really hard to, I guess, like, I don't know, like once you become pregnant, if you have people in your life who are close to you in terms of family and things like that, it's a really, really cool thing to be able to, include them in that aspect. But it's also a little bit hard to what it feels like lose some of maybe your privacy or your routines or something like that. And I'm just kind of anticipating that once the baby is here, that we probably will lose a little bit of those things that we enjoy as a couple and as our routines have like dictated and that we've enjoyed for the entire time we've lived together. So I guess it's just the anticipation really of like our lives are no longer our own in a lot of ways, like even aside from just the baby.
And the last one is tips or advice for anyone trying to get pregnant.
I do have thoughts about pregnancy and conception and things like that. I don't agree as a general rule to just share those things in like the broader sense. Like I'm not really interested in being a person that gives unsolicited advice, just like I'm not a person who's interested in receiving unsolicited advice. I will say if you have specific questions for me as an individual or for Tim, you can certainly message us and we will have that conversation with you specifically. But as like a general piece of advice, what I will say is I would say just be kind to yourself. like if your expectations for what your conception journey or your pregnancy are not what is happening in reality versus what you had pictured, to just be kind to yourself. And what I mean by that is specifically, I always thought that when I got pregnant, I would be really, strict with myself about what I put into my body. Like I would eat whole foods, and I would be strictly organic, and I would be chugging water night and day, and, doing all of those things. And that has not been my reality, because there are some days where it's just like, I put in my body whatever will provide me with calories to live, and I can keep down. Yeah. And I have not been, there have been times when I felt a little guilty about that, but I would just say if you have concerns about maybe something not lining up with the way that you saw it being before, or that doesn't match up with your plans, to maybe speak with a doctor, or if you do want advice from somebody, to get advice. But in general, to just be okay with doing the best that you can. And that is okay. And babies are incredibly resilient, and they're just chilling in there. And if you're taking your prenatal vitamins, most likely those little parasites are sucking up every piece of nutrient that they need from you, and they're doing just fine. So yeah, I mean, in general, again, we're not going to provide any medical advice in any way, but just be okay with what your reality is. Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of Marital Tiffs.
Oh, we talked about a lot today, guys.
Yeah, this was a long one.
This was a long episode, but I'm so excited. We're so excited to finally share this with you guys. I mean, we can't even tell you the number of episodes we've recorded knowing that I'm pregnant and not saying anything. Tim deserves a medal.
Yeah, you could do the math. We found out in mid-July. Yeah. So 7 or 8 episodes.
Yeah, and also any arguments that we've had, maybe give me a little more leeway, because I was sick as hell recording those episodes.
The hardest one was our 2 episodes where we were talking about major life change in the middle of Corona. And I'm like, oh my God.
And also Amber and Brandon and Minda and Bo knew that they were told, they were some of the people we told that I was pregnant. So to not have none of us bring it up at any point, I think was just like a Herculean feat. And it was just super cool. But anyway, I mean, to finally be able to share with you guys is something that is so awesome and precious to us, and we definitely cherish. And if you have any additional questions for us that we didn't cover, or if you do want our advice about anything that we discussed, we definitely would be happy to chat with you guys. And, we told you from the beginning at every start of this podcast that we're bringing you into our marriage. And I think that we have proven now that is true.
Yeah. And while we're not trying to be like road pavers, we do think that some of the stuff that we've talked about isn't talked about enough. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why we wanted to be upfront with our audience.
Yeah.
So if you have questions or discussion about some of those things, you can weigh in on all our social media at Marital Tiffs on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If some of those things are something you don't want to post publicly where everybody can see, you can email us at maritaltiffs@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe anywhere you find your podcast. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, please rate and review us. You can find us on the 910 Comedy Podcast Network. Check out 910 Comedy on Facebook, and check out our sister shows, That's Just My Face, Hometown Crowd, and Dead Girls Talking. Thanks for listening to Marital Tiffs.